In 1983, tragedy struck when the Byford Dolphin, an oil rig operating in the North Sea, experienced a catastrophic accident. 4 saturation divers and 1 crew member lost their lives in a gruesome incident that shook the commercial diving industry to its core. Join us as we dive into the series of events leading up to that day and the irreversible consequences that unfolded. In the early 1960s, Norway's economy was primarily reliant on fishing, wood exports, and hydroelectric power. However, everything began to change in 1963, when the Norwegian government claimed its sovereign rights over the North Sea, considering it more of a burden than a strategic advantage. Following treaties signed after World War II, England handed over the control of the North Sea to Norway. In 1969, the ship Ocean Viking made a groundbreaking discovery within Norway's control area. It stumbled upon one of the largest oil reserves in the world. Soon, Norway began extracting 1.6 million barrels of crude oil per day, leading to tremendous economic growth. One noteworthy gas reservoir in Norway was located in the Frigg field. To extract this gas, the government hired British Petroleum, which in turn subcontracted dolphin drilling. The engineers at Dolphin Drilling faced an immense challenge due to the significant depth between the surface and the seafloor. With the gas pocket located approximately 7,000 feet below the water level, they devised a plan to utilize a semi-submersible stabilized column drilling rig known as the Byford Dolphin. This remarkable engineering machine measured 355 feet in length, 221 feet in width, and had a depth of 120 feet. Capable of drilling to a depth of 20,000 feet and operating in water depths of 1,500 feet, the rig was equipped with advanced drilling equipment and had its own maneuvering engines. It truly was an impressive machine. Operating such a colossal rig required a substantial workforce, and a total of 102 people worked on the platform. Each team member had a specific role, but among the mechanics and engineers, there were also 6 professional scuba divers who were responsible for maintaining and repairing the submerged parts of the platform, as well as the drills and extractors during their operation. This small team of divers played a crucial role in the complex job, which went beyond what one could imagine. Have you ever wondered what it's like to spend weeks on end underwater, living in a cramped, high-pressure chamber? Well, that's the reality for saturation divers. Professional divers that take on extreme depths to service offshore oil rigs and undersea pipelines. Unlike regular commercial divers who work a few hours and return to the surface, saturation divers endure up to 28 days on a single job, performing crucial maintenance tasks below the waves. The pay for saturation divers can be incredibly rewarding, ranging from $30,000 to $45,000 a month. But the work itself is no walk in the park. These divers face an otherworldly and claustrophobic environment that demands intense focus and exceptional skills, and let's not forget the dangers involved. In 1983, tragedy struck when the Byford Dolphin, an oil rig operating in the North Sea, experienced a catastrophic accident. 4 saturation divers and 1 crew member lost their lives in a gruesome incident that shook the commercial diving industry to its core. Before we delve into the details of the Byford Dolphin accident, let's first understand why decompression sickness is a grave concern for divers. The divers of the Byford Dolphin worked under unique conditions due to the depths at which they operated. Working at a depth of 330 feet presented a specific challenge because ordinary air tanks couldn't sustain normal breathing due to the intense pressure at that depth. To carry out their operations, the divers had to breathe a specialized gas mixture called trimix, which consists of oxygen, helium, and nitrogen. However, inhaling nitrogen poses a risk to the body, especially during rapid ascent. This is a crucial consideration for divers worldwide. As a diver descends, the pressure around them causes nitrogen gas to dissolve into their bloodstream, but ascending too quickly can lead to nitrogen bubbles forming, causing a painful and potentially fatal condition that can cause excruciating joint and muscle pain, delirium, paralysis, heart attacks, and strokes. This can be addressed through a treatment method involving the use of a specialized enclosure known as a hyperbaric chamber. In this case, the affected individual is placed inside this chamber, where they're subjected to controlled pressure. Over a period of hours or days, the pressure is gradually reduced, allowing for the effective management and alleviation of decompression sickness symptoms. But the best strategy is to avoid decompression sickness altogether by slowly ascending to the surface and taking frequent breaks to let your body naturally exhale or off-gas the nitrogen. Certified scuba divers know how to read a recreational dive planner, which guides them on when to conduct safety breaks during their ascent and for how long. Commercial divers, however, are asked to work at depths far beyond what any recreational scuba diver would dare to attempt. As we'll explore next, that requires a whole different type of decompression, and it was a failure in that system that led to the violent deaths of the Byford Dolphin divers. So, how do saturation divers manage to stay underwater for extended periods without succumbing to decompression sickness? The deeper you dive and the longer you stay underwater, the more nitrogen gets dissolved in your bloodstream. Eventually, a diver's body becomes saturated with dissolved nitrogen, which is how saturation divers get their name. Saturation divers operate at astonishing depths of up to 1,000 feet. If they use the same decompression technique as recreational divers, slowly ascending with long pauses, it would take them days to reach the surface. Instead, saturation divers are shuttled to the surface in pressurized diving bells and spend time in specialized decompression chambers. For every 100 feet that a saturation diver descends, they need to spend approximately 1 day in the chamber. Once inside, the saturation divers chill on cots, watch movies, and receive food through pressurized slots. However, the problem is that it's not cost-effective for oil companies to pay saturation divers for a few hours of work and several days of rest. And interestingly, once a diver reaches the saturation level, their body cannot absorb any more nitrogen, regardless of how long they remain underwater. So instead of decompressing after each dive, saturation divers just remain under pressure. For up to 28 days, the industry maximum, saturation divers will commute to the depths in pressurized diving bells. But instead of entering a decompression chamber on the surface, saturation divers reside in a hyperbaric chamber that sustains their bodies at the same pressure level as the deep water. By staying compressed, they can work out there for as long as they need to. And when you bring them back up, you don't need to worry about decompression, says Newsom, whose organization helps to establish international safety standards for commercial diving. That is, until the job is done. The last week of any saturation diver's job is reserved for slow and steady decompression before finally leaving the confined chambers and breathing fresh air again. It takes a whole crew to make a saturation diving operation work. Life support technicians ensure that the air mix in the hyperbaric chamber matches the diver's breathing mixture underwater. The dive control team operates the diving bell, which is raised and lowered by a crane, and monitors the divers during their work. There are even cooks that prepare and serve meals to the divers who are confined in the living chambers. The saturation divers are completely at the mercy of the rest of the crew, says Newsom. On November 5th, 1983, an experienced tender named William Crammond was in the midst of a routine procedure aboard the Byford Dolphin, a semi-submersible oil rig operating in the North Sea. The rig had 2 pressurized living chambers, each accommodating 2 divers. At that specific moment, Edwin Arthur Coward and Roy P. Lucas were resting in Chamber 2 at a pressure of 9 atmospheres. Crammond had just connected the diving bell with Bjorn Geir Bergersen and Truls Hellevik to the trunk of the living chambers. Leaving their wet equipment in the trunk, the 2 divers climbed from the trunk into Chamber 1. That's when things went horribly wrong. Normally, the diving bell would not be detached from the living chambers until the chamber doors were safely sealed shut. However, the diving bell detached before the door of Chamber 1 was closed, leading to what is known as an explosive decompression. It's a death sentence, says Newsom. You won't survive. The air pressure inside the Byford Dolphin living chambers instantly went from 9 atmospheres, the pressure experienced hundreds of feet below the water, to 1 atmosphere, the normal air pressure at the surface. The explosive rush of air out of the chamber propelled the heavy diving bell, killing Crammond and critically injuring his fellow crew member, Martin Saunders. The fate of the 4 saturation divers inside was far worse. According to autopsy reports, Coward and Lucas of Chamber 2 and Bergersen of Chamber 1 were essentially boiled from the inside when the nitrogen in their blood violently erupted into gas bubbles. They died instantly. The 4th diver, Truls Hellevik, suffered the most horrifying death. Hellevik was standing in front of the partially open door to the living chamber when the pressure was released. The force was so powerful that his body was sucked out through an opening so narrow that it tore him open and ejected his internal organs onto the deck. The Byford Dolphin was one of the worst oil field disasters in history, says Newsom, and it led to sweeping changes in the North Sea and in commercial diving safety worldwide. During the early days of oil exploration in the 1960s, safety measures were not always prioritized, resulting in numerous diving fatalities. It is estimated that at least 58 diving deaths occurred in the North Sea between the 1960s and the early 2000s. Today, every diving operation is required to make an extensive risk assessment and hazard analysis. There are redundancies built into every procedure to minimize human error or faulty equipment. Some oil rigs are even equipped with special hyperbaric lifeboats that can transport saturation divers away from a hurricane or fire without having to bring them back to surface pressure first. Sadly, it took several decades for the Norwegian government, which operated the Byford Dolphin in 1983, to acknowledge responsibility for the accident and provide compensation to the families of the 5 men who lost their lives. It wasn't until 2009 that the Norwegian government finally paid undisclosed sums of money to the families of all 6 victims involved in the 1983 incident, including the injured survivor, Saunders. The investigation report indicated that the accident was attributed to faulty equipment rather than human error. In 2016, the Byford Dolphin rig was decommissioned, marking the end of its operational life. As we conclude this captivating dive into the Byford Dolphin accident, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that like button and consider subscribing to our channel for more tragic stories.